All right. Welcome to this video in this 2021 Epiphone Les Paul Jr. that's had its headstock sheared off. I believe in shipping when it was new. Um, I think this guitar was a new guitar when I got it. However, um, broken. This little piece has been glued back on. I did bring it to a luthier, a local guitar repair shop, and they said they could fix it and looked at it and kept it for a little while and glued that little piece on, but then ended up giving it back to me because they decided against the repair, maybe because it's been sheared off the way it has. All the end grain and all that stiffest there. The two pieces fit together well. Um, and I'm gonna route this out and put a pair of splines in there. We have this tubing, vinyl tubing, rubber tubing. I don't know if it's vinyl. Made this little jig out of my camera or amp stand and to hold the camera. I decided I'm gonna do the splines. I'm just gonna do it. I'm pretty handy, I guess. I fix things, so let's fix this. I've watched a lot of videos on headstock repair here on YouTube. I have repaired a few headstocks, glued them on there. If the headstock is broken off at an angle that makes the repair simple, so I've done some simple repairs. But I've never attempted anything this wild, and it's an Epiphone, so I don't feel like let's say I do a really terrible job. Um, this guitar that I probably paid $200 for, maybe three, but I think more like two, because it's broken. That I you know, if nothing else, I can salvage the parts from it, and uh, it was a learning experience. All right, maybe I didn't do the greatest work, but here we are, Tight Bond original wood glue. We're just gluing the headstock back in place. And looking back on it, maybe I could have used epoxy because I'm doing the splines. So the epoxy probably would have been easier. But hey, the wood glue's fine. That's what I did. It's what most people would do. So I don't regret it. Now, yeah, we're using a little modeling paintbrush to get as much glue and as much little nooks and crannies of the wood grain as possible. I guess while we're watching this boring footage of me gluing this, and it's sideways too. Sorry, it's sideways. I filmed it wrong. Um, I'm not a luthier. I'm not licensed or anything like that, properly trained. I have been buying guitars for maybe 20 years, and um, at one point just started repairing ones that needed small work because it wasn't maybe too hard. And again, you just look up how something is done and do it. And I'm getting old here, so I have to take my glasses off in order to be able to see things that are close to me. Here we are cleaning a little bit of the glue off. What I did was ran the thicker tubing. I bought two different diameters of tubing through the holes that are closest to the neck, the E and E. We're trying to position the headstock. I saw this method on somebody else's video. I forgot whose it was. I watched a bunch of T. Woodford's videos on headstock splines, and that really inspired me, but it really made the job look skilled and difficult. The guy's a master for a reason, and I'm not, but again, let's give it a try. This guy needed splines. I mean, it really needs the splines because the headstock break was a shear break. That glue in that sheared off position would be, I think it'd be fragile no matter what. There's so many ways that a headstock could break off. We all love Gibson guitars, but there it is. Um, But this, I think, is probably one of the worst ways because there's no surface area for the glue to hold. Here we are pulling the tubing tight and wrapping around the bridge studs. So what I have is hopefully scientifically the closest thing I can get to straight down force, as opposed to clamps that would just, if a clamp sat on the two sides of the headstock, on the fretboard side and on the back side, I don't know if that'd really hold it in place. Whereas this method, which I saw in somebody's video here on YouTube, we'll try to put it in the comments, but I don't remember. We're trying to pull the headstock down, um, kind of like string force would possibly do this. So here we are, the second layer of tubing through the A and B holes, wrapping it around. It looks like I'm just wrapping it around the body of the guitar and the horn. Doesn't look pretty, but what we have here now is hopefully the headstock being held in place the way it should be. It's not as tight as a clamp would be, obviously, but it's close. And we're putting the splines in, so again, if the glue job isn't perfect, it's probably okay. Here we are pulling some more squeeze out with just a paper towel, I guess, ever the professional. Why Les Paul Jr.? Because Johnny Thunders played a Les Paul Jr., so we play Les Paul Jr. Why this Epiphone? Because I play in a local cover band and I have some fancier Gibsons, and I don't need expensive guitars. I don't know that I have the skill to really rock an expensive guitar effectively or justify it. Here we did put a clamp because there was that one surface area where there was a diagonal part of the glue. We used a whole lot of this tubing, the thinner diameter tubing, once we got that in place to really, really tie this thing up and put as much force, down force on that headstock as possible. Here it is glued up. And I've marked off with a silver Sharpie where I want to put those splines. We want to make them long enough to make the spline effective. But I don't know how long they need to be, because again, this is whatever. This is just me giving it the first try. I use my Dremel with a diamond bit, and I borrowed a little bit of a starter channel. I made this jig out of scrap wood that's just laying around my house. Took a lot of measurements, did a lot of deep thought, maybe meditated a little bit, and here we are taking the first passes with the Bosch Colt handheld router. I think it was a Japanese guy who did splines, and his jig looked very simple. And I was like, well, I think I could make a jig like that. I can't make the jigs that I see in a lot of people's videos. I don't have, deep. I don't have all the tools. I think I have the knowledge. I just don't have all the tools to, build the jig, power saws and tabletop saws and I don't know, all these things that I don't have. But, I do have a lot of scrap wood. I do have a little workshop in the basement. It's not my workshop, but I can use it as long as I sort of clean up after myself. Here you can see that the jig is clamped to the table. The guitar is angled into the jig. And there's my first pass. There's my first, not first pass, my first channel. Maybe this is the second channel. I don't know yet. But anyway, the blue tape was obviously not to protect anything. It was more so that visually I would be able to see what I was doing. Yeah, this is definitely the second spline channel. I moved the piece of wood that sits on top of the jig to the other side, measured it out. I can't tell you how many times I measured these things just to try to get it right. I did leave the shop vac going while I did this, hoping it would pull most of the dust. I wore a mask because I'd never done this before, so I didn't know how rough it was going to get. So suction and face protection, I guess. Just visually looking at it from different angles, trying to figure out where I am, because the jig and the router are just constantly in the way of you being able to see where you are. But if you go slow, maybe it's not so bad. Here we are, taking the guitar off the jig, off the table. The routing is done, and to me, I don't know if this was the scariest part. Crafting the splines was to me probably the most anxious part. Here are my channels. They're not perfect. You can obviously see where the original crack was. I did bust through the truss rod channel right there, just a little space, and I have a little bit of an asymmetrical part there, but we have ideas on how to make that not a big deal. Here I am with the very first spline that I had crafted out of maple. It's glued in place. I didn't film myself crafting the spline because this was probably the most tedious process. You can see some chips in the finish. You can see that hole where I kind of get through to the chamber. Here's the piece of maple that I elected to use for the next part. I just went to Menards and looked through the trim section because I had bought mahogany there before. So I said, well, they got to have maple. Well, they didn't have a very good selection of maple, but what do you expect when you go to a hardware store, a big box chain store? They did have, though, a relatively thin strip, a very long strip, a very thin strip of maple. I elected to use maple on this repair because of the sheer style headstock break. It's not going to be the same color as the guitar, but form over function? No, wait. Function, I don't know. I didn't. The point is, I didn't care how perfect it looked. I care that if anybody looks at it, they will see that a lot of care was taken in the repair of this guitar to make sure that it is reliable, repair wise. Here we are. You saw me test fit it and it didn't fit. Well, here I am test fitting it. It's getting close. This is just the roughest file that I have, the largest file that I have. We put it in the vise and we're just trimming it down. I believe this is the final footage of me test fitting it. It took a lot longer than is filmed. I filmed a lot of footage, and I wanted to kind of keep this video about an hour maybe, because I'm fixing two guitars. Here it is. It fits. Now we'll shape it a little bit differently. I had to take the vice grips to get it out because it fits so snug. So we do have to take a little bit more material off so it isn't quite so brute force. We're kind of also cross stitching some scratches on the sides for the glue to hold in. But here we are test fitting yet again. It's mostly a silent film. You can hear some crap going on in the background. I'm usually listening to podcasts or watching Star Trek or listening to, my favorite few bands while we do this. It's just to not hit a lot of copyright problems and things like that. We certainly are keeping the volume low. But there it is, fits A lot of the footage is sped up too. I speed it up to about 2 times as fast. This is not sped up because um, I had to pull it out again. So I probably did a little bit more sanding on this or filing on this to get it right. You know, the curvature on each side, had to get that right. You know, it was especially maple being so hard, it was kind of hard to file it right or to sand it right, which is why I'm using that file instead of just sandpaper, because you know, when I first started doing this, it took a long time, and this was the most discouraging part. The routing was nerve-wracking because if I took the wrong turn, we might tear up the entire upper neck side of this guitar, and a really skilled guy could probably fix that, but I'd be, as the children say, cooked. And as boring as it might be watching me do this, it's as good as I could do. I'd already trimmed a lot of it out, but we're just, you know, just constant test fitting. So there's the first spline carved down a little bit. And here we are, we're about to glue the second spline in place. Again, we're just using Type On original formula wood glue. Using a little paintbrush to make sure we get as much into as many little spaces as possible. To get the best adhesion and all that, and making the repair as structurally solid as possible, hopefully. I did cut a little bit of material off the top of the spline so that I don't have to do so much chiseling and filing later to shape it. That was another sort of nervous part. We'll see that later. But there we popped it in place. And I think I just used the rubber tubing. What am I saying? I think I did. You'll see it in a minute. I did. A little bit of squeeze out. Yeah, we're going to wrap the tubing around it. I believe this is the thicker of the two styles of tubing. And we just wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. And I probably, in hindsight, should have clamped it. Because I'm pretty sure that it went all the way into the ditch that I drilled, routed. But, you know, it would have been more for sure had I clamped it and then used that type of pressure. But we did use a lot of tubing, as you can see, to wrap this guy mercilessly to try to keep it in place and give it as much downforce as possible. And I clamped it with a relatively large plastic spring clamp. Let it sit for probably a day. Yep, it just sat on the stand for a day. I put a Firebird pickup in it using a ring. The ring is not the stock ring, but here it is filed to profile using another file, a round file. A semicircular file with quite a wide radius. And yeah, so we're taking a lot of finish off the guitar and everything, but you know, again, I wanted it to feel comfortable to play. This is still the rough file, the rough sand. Here is well sanded, and then with a little bit of clear polyurethane put over the top of it. There was a little bit of sawdust and glue filler in some of those areas. I did decide after I'd, you know, repaired it and played it a few times that I was going to try to hide the repair a little bit better. We're using a candy clear root beer color I think it's meant for RC cars, but this website says it's enamel, so I didn't feel too careful or too nervous about using it. Again, we're just trying to dye the wood a little bit darker, um, so it's just not quite so obvious because those two very blonde splines were shockingly apparent. Here it is with just the root beer paint sanded back a little bit. Um, and we'll get back to the Les Paul later, but we're going to move on to the second guitar. This is a 2020 Firebird, Epiphone Firebird, that I bought around the same time as I bought the Junior. It also had the headstock break. The same local company, local repair shop that I brought it to, they did glue the headstock back in place because this has a way more angled break. It's one that I could have fixed, but I thought they were going to repair that little hole where you can see that other little piece of wood. It was missing a chunk of wood, and I did not have the confidence in myself to do that. So I asked them to do it. Well, they glued the headstock back on and they set the guitar up, but then there was a hole in the back and you could see the truss rod. So I fashioned this little piece of, I think it's rosewood, it's the only wood that I had that was, of the thickness that I needed, or more like slimness that I needed. I've been playing this guitar for a while. I'm not as rough on it as I am on a standard guitar because these have pencil thin necks, and the repairs there, and it's just, I don't know. Like I've always dreamed that I should put a spline in this one too. So in this one, we're only going to put one spline, because I think the repair is solid. I just want the repair to be foolproof. So we're going to put the repair on this side, the spline on this side. We're going to use a thicker spline, and just use one. And we're going to do maple. I thought about doing mahogany on this one. But again, structural integrity. This guitar is never going to be worth a ton of money. These are like $600 new. If the repaired model, like a used one's probably like $550. I'm just estimating prices. Maybe they're $700 new. I don't know. But again, I got this for a couple $100 because the headstock was shattered off. And once it was repaired, I did play it a lot. The face of the headstock is definitely missing some stuff. I just put a piece of electrical tape over it, but I'm gonna work on that too. I did that off camera because that was way hit and miss. Yeah, this is my favorite Firebird. I took the neck pickup out. That's the pickup that I just put in the other Les Paul. Because I have a second Epiphone Les Paul Jr., the Inspired by Gibson line, and it has the P90. I don't need two of them, but I have two of them, so I felt that with the quick connect pickup system, that if I buy that adapter ring, I can make one of the Les Paul Juniors sound a little different than the other Les Paul Jr., and therefore I have some versatility. I am using the same jig that I used for the Junior. That ended up being a mistake, but I've been pretty cautious about the measurements and all that, so I was able to go through the second pass. Here I am taking a bunch of measurements, and I write the measurements down, and actually that was probably just me checking the measurements, checking the channel, not the channel, the guide for the router. I measured the depth that the router was plunging. I measured that the distance from the tabletop to the, all kinds of stuff, right? Many times. The blue tape, again, is more for guidance, just visual guidance, than it is for protection of any kind. You'll probably see the flaws in my workmanship here as I'm working on it. I did not do the thing with the Dremel first because I don't know if that did a great job. Here we are plunging for the first time and taking a sweep. Now, what I've got here, the mistake that I made is the guide on the top of your screen is where the router's base and sub bass are running against. But Notice how it doesn't make full contact with the bottom side of the jig, which means that the route that I made is uneven. Um, I didn't think that was going to be a problem at first. And looking at my initial routing work, it was like, yeah, this is not what I want it to be. Here we are taking a second pass. I believe we have not moved anything. Um, I think my love of the Gibson Firebird first comes with uh, my childhood love for Motley Crue. Nikki Sixx played a Thunderbird, which I know is a bass, but I've just thought that that shape is so beautiful, and um, I have a couple Gibson Firebirds as well as I have some Gibson Juniors. But yeah, this is another mistake that I made. Oh Jesus, boy, the route is not terrible, and I could have used it, but it just wasn't. This was not my best work. Yeah, not gonna lie. But love the Firebird. Love playing the fire. I love the size of the Firebird. Here's the second jig that I made. Um, Again, out of the scrap 1x4s, but also used some scrap trim stuff to build a really, really good guide. It's still clamped to the table. I was able to bolster the guitar at a slightly different angle to get deeper, both at the headstock and at the base of the neck. I wanted the route to be as deep as possible to have as much spline in there as possible. I used a bigger bit, um, a much bigger bit actually on the router to make sure that I only had to do one pass and I would have the channel, the proper routed channel that I wanted. And this is way quality, way better. um, Whatever. Here we are cutting the spline, the piece of maple that I got. Again, I just get these things from Menards. I don't know if the quality is crazy high on the maple and mahogany that they sell there as trim pieces, but I also don't know that the quality of the wood that they use on the Epiphones is great. But yeah, we wanted the spline to strengthen up the neck on this guitar so that I can go full on rock and roller when I play this thing. I've been always been very inspired by Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick, who will grab the headstock of any guitar and bend it like it's a whammy bar, and all of a sudden, you get kind of a dive bomb effect. It's a lot gentler than what we're saying. I mean, wood is meant to flex. You see trees swaying in the wind all the time. Here we are. This is just broad shaping. Again, a very, very rough file. The guy at the hardware store called it a bastard file. I don't know if that's a proper terminology. We got some chisels. Here we are. It's pretty well to shape. The curvature on each end is good. It's still way too snug though. So again, we're just taking little bits of material off at a time. Did I get this thing out of here with my hand, or did I have to use the vice grips? This is welcome to the director's commentary track. I was just going to voice over while I was working, but I realized that would, God, that'd be a mess. This is already very unprofessional. So this time I busted through the truss rod route, again, ever so slightly. But I did see a character use a drinking straw. I cut the drinking straw and we slide it into the channel so that the plastic part is facing the hole. I did this on the Junior as well. And, we're doing this to provide a membrane on the between the hole in the wood where the router broke through and the truss rod itself. Neither of the truss rods were damaged because again it was just barely through, but here we are stuffing the straw in there to make sure that we are good. You've already seen me do this once, so a lot of this footage is sped up. Um, some of the footage is obviously doubled from guitar to guitar. Some of the footage that I forgot to film for the Les Paul, I filmed for this guitar, and vice versa. I didn't always film stuff for this one because I already filmed it for the other one. Video's about an hour long because I'm doing 2 repairs. I did this over the course of 2 months. The Les Paul Jr. I did in January of 2025, and this Firebird I did in February of 2025. Um, Here we are pressing it in place. I realized pretty quick that this guy was not gonna cooperate, so we did clamp this one in place instead of use the rubber tubing. I drew a pencil line around, the test fit so that we could see if it was all the way in there. And yes, the pencil line is flush, which means we were able to hydraulically push this thing with the clamps all the way into the channel, which is, well, it's the effect that we want. You want the repair to be the wood to be all in contact and everything, and there it is. And it's in place. This guy being a thicker piece of maple, I didn't use a chisel to shape it. I just used this flush saw. It's a very sharp saw, so it cuts through the maple pretty good. Obviously, I mean, the footage is sped up, but it goes a lot faster than it would with any of the other saws that I had. I know I'm very brutal in the way that I do these things. I mean, I try to be as gentle as possible, but I know that the methods are not, beautiful, proper woodworking. But hey, the repairs ended up good, so I wouldn't make a video if they didn't. This is, I know it had a Gibson truss rod cover. You may have seen that. That's just a bootleg truss rod cover. That's just me being a wise guy. But, we put some tape on it. The tape just magically appeared. That was special effects. I realized that using the saw, I was going to need to protect the surface area a little better. So we're using the tape to sort of protect the surface area from the saw. Not that the saw wouldn't cut through the tape like butter, but you'd see that the saw was snagging on the tape, and, that technique. If we can even call anything I'm doing here a technique, but I'm trying. Okay, so here we are. This is sped up, and it's still kind of boring. Cutting chunks of the proud part of the spline out. I really still probably was sitting here marveling in I'm currently sitting here marveling in my craftsmanship that I was able to take these 2 guitars that, this guitar was a one-trick pony. I used it to play every once in a while, with the band that I play in, but I did not use it as like my main guitar because I never really thought it was reliable because that repair was just so rinky-dink. But now we're going to have a much more effective repair. I didn't think I could do this. When I took to that Les Paul Jr. in January, I was like, well, if we die, we die. And we didn't. We're doing good. We're cutting this thing up. We're making it look good. We're making it solid. And we're just cutting one little section out at a time because boy, did it take forever. Here we are. Oh, starting to file. So this is the semi-round file. One side is flat, one side is round. So we use the flat side on the parts of the neck that don't curve up towards the headstock. And again, the tape is on there so that I can start to see when I'm breaking through. And I definitely break through. And you have to, because you're never going to get the profile of the neck without doing that. Oh, here's the round file. Man, I guess I had use two different ones, even though the flat side. Oh, the flat one has a handle on it, so the handle's easier to hold. But where you're using the round file to get probably some of those saw marks off. But again, we're just trying to profile the neck similar to what it had been. I don't know that I'm a finicky enough player where I notice perfection, but I definitely would notice if the neck profile had, a big proud lump in it or something. There's the round side, and we're filing the angle, the headstock angle. You got to use the round file to get that curved part of the angle. But yeah, I've been doing electronic work on guitars, especially Gibson guitars, if they got that switch that Gibson uses, and I'm pretty good at that at this point. Again, very sort of amateurish luthier wise, but I'm able to develop my skill on these things and become a pretty effective guy. I don't do a lot of work for other people, but I do have a couple friends that I've done a little bit of work for. Mainly just, if they can't afford to have it done at the store. I'm like, well, I'll take a stab at it, and I'm usually very successful. Now here's the flat part of the headstock, so we go back to the flat file. You can see I'm starting to break through on the corner of the headstock there, but man, I should have just put another piece of tape there, but I didn't, because I didn't. Again, don't really care how beautiful the repair is. Just want anybody that looks at it. Not that I ever plan on selling these two guitars, but if I did, anybody that was like prejudiced, well, I don't like broken guitars, like they're fine. They've been repaired. This one's been repaired with care. This one's been given a level of stability that, I think a standard Firebird doesn't have at this point. I don't know if it's false or true, but everybody says Firebirds just break all the time. Well, this is the first Firebird that I've ever owned that's had a headstock repair. I think I've had 3 or 4 Epiphone Firebirds and 3 or 4 Gibson Firebirds, and they've been good except for this one. But I bought this one and it was broken, so I knew what I was getting myself into. I wanted to do the repair work. I wanted to give it a try. And again, I did have a shop do part of it because when I looked at it initially, it seemed out of my league. I guess 2025, I decided to be bold and get into a new league. But, yep. I think I'm done with the rough carve or the rough filing of the headstock profile. Or not. But we're pretty well done with this section. You can see the back of that headstock where I autographed it, like I'm some big famous rock star. I like to personalize all my stuff. Using my fingernails to find the flaws in my craftsmanship. Here we are. Yep, this is just the filed down version. This is not clean sanded yet. But it's pretty smooth. It's good. Here's the other side of it. You can see not a lot of proudness to it. You can see the curvature. This is, I believe, 150 sandpaper, so pretty rough sandpaper. Just to finalize that neck profile, because the file is going to be very rough. Here we are cleaning up that edge of the headstock that I was a little bit too rough on. Oh, I'm talking to my sister in the background, just talking stuff, but it's sped up, so confidential situation maybe, I don't know. But cleaning up, trying to get the profile as good as possible. Right, and the thing is, again, since most of them are my age or your age, you know that they are gossiping. I did not show this on the Les Paul, so I think I showed more footage on this guitar just to make sure we know. um, how I did it. Didn't do a lot of finish work on these guitars. Didn't show a lot of that fine tuning work because there's other people on the internet that do that way better than me. But I just wanted to show the woodworking aspect of it to, if let's say you are relatively handy with tools like routers and files and whatever, and you're like, I could never do this kind of headstock repair. It's obviously the most skilled labor of all time. It is, but, you know, I would encourage you to maybe not start on your higher end guitar, but find some cheaper guitars like this and see what you can effectively manage. I have a third guitar that I need to do this to. It's a Oscar Schmidt Washburn 12 string acoustic. I've done the glue job and it's solid and it has 6 strings on it currently, but to be a 12 string again, I think it needs splines because that's a whole lot of pressure. That's a whole lot of pull on that headstock. So we'll be doing this on that too at some point. It's got a couple body cracks in it too. So, you know, as my woodworking confidence builds, we will be taking on that project as well. Have I switched to 320 sandpaper yet? If it's a darker paper in my hand than it is. Nope, we're still 150ing it. Again, we have a little shop in the basement where I can make a mess. I have a shop vac so I can clean up after myself. Oh yeah. So there's the profile, the rough profile. Still using the 150. Man. Maybe I just wasn't happy with the texture yet. You got to be happy with because that's right behind the first maybe even second fret, and your hand rests there, your palm rests there. Any guitar player, I'm not telling you, you don't need to know. You just what it is. So we're still working it. Yeah, there's 500. I skipped the 320 step. We went straight to 500. You want to know why? That's why. I don't know why. But I didn't use anything finer than 500 because, again, I wasn't trying to make the finish shiny and polished and beautiful. Again, I don't have that skill. And plus, these are translucent finished guitars. You're going to see the wood grain through it. You're going to see imperfections through it. You're going to see the crack through it. You're going to see the spline through it. All this stuff. I thought about using some black or some brown or something, and just covering up the repair. But to me, that seemed just as cheesy as allowing the repair to just be bold. Everybody's going to know there's a problem, or there was a problem. And I would so much rather allow that problem to be seen, because again, then anybody could see that this was done with care. Here we are zapping a few sort of gaps. I think I went around the whole spline with the super glue because we're sort of just locking that seam in place. I don't know if it's the best method or the perfect method, but it's the method that I've seen that works. I also went with the super glue around the little inlay that I made previously to fill the little hole that had been in the back of the neck. So we let this dry for a bunch of hours. I masked it off. I'd sanded it again. I masked it off for the root beer paint. Again, sort of a clear brown candy root beer. Not pretty, but more effective. We're going to sand back those hard lines. And we went over it with a little bit of polyurethane. Here I used a lot of super glue method to fill in the valleys on the headstock. You can see where I left some valley where it's going to be under the truss rod cover, but I definitely filled the rest of it I got to promise you, it was not a perfect job. You can still see where there's imperfection, but it is definitely flat now and flush and looks worlds better. Here we are with clear polyurethane. Since these guitars are finished with poly in the first place, I felt like this is the best way to finish it. Keep it consistent with the original. You can tell that it's darker. You can tell that the spline is lighter. I wrote my name on the spline, so I would always know that I did the repair. And yes, I'm using the foam brush. We didn't spray it, but I'll sand it back. This one, I think, in the end, doesn't look as good as the Les Paul. Here it is sanded back. This is I need to wet sand it maybe, but this is kind of the final color and the final job. Here's the Les Paul, final color, final job. Again, after sanding it, we did get a little bit of through to the maple and everything, but it's a lot darker now, so it's just a lot less prevalent. And there's my 2 repairs. Done. Tools I used, old clamp, files, saws, wood glue, clamps, pencil, obviously, a little tripod for the camera, some saws, some chisels, all this stuff. The vise came in real handy. That really saved my life. Here's the router and an extra sub bass that I got for it. A bunch of bits in a little container there. Great purchase. I've gotten a lot of work out of it. Here's a stack of wood in the basement. It's just here for anyone to use. The bolster is there. That's what I used to hold the guitar up. Here's the first one and the second jig that I made. This jig was probably more specialized. This jig was kind of rough, but the Les Paul had a symmetrical headstock. Both guitars have been splined and repaired and are good to go. Let's show off the Firebird first. Here it is. The repair is clean. The neck is smooth. It's not super pretty. It's not super pretty, but we never really needed it to be super pretty. I've always loved the Firebird shape. It's kind of a Nikki Sixx and Arthur Kane influence. And when I saw Steve Jones playing one of these on video, I was like, yeah, I like that. I like that shape. I didn't know they made a Thunderbird as a guitar, as we say. So, you know, the Firebird's kind of been one of my favorite shapes for a long time. And the cover band that you saw footage of me playing, and those were 2 original tunes that, shout out to Mike Gully for writing those songs. You know, I just thought a Firebird would be cool. It fits the look of the band. It fits the tone of the band. You know, the mini humbucker isn't quite my preferred tone. I like the P90, but I got used to it. You know, we're not trying to cover it up. We're not trying to make it look like it hasn't been repaired. We're trying to make it look like it has been repaired, and that it's been repaired well. So, you know, what I can do now is, you know, when I strike something, I can, you know, bend it out of pitch or whatever, and not have to worry about, you know, the previous just glue repair being good enough. Obviously the neck pickup's been taken out, and it's a Firebird 1 kind of and all, but shape. It's an Epiphone. It does have a counterfeit Gibson truss rod cover, but we're not trying to sell this to anybody. We're trying to play this. So, you know, there it is. It's pretty well stock. Other than that, it's got different knobs on it because I like the knobs to have the splineness, so I can, you know, easily turn them without trying to grab the knob or whatever. It's got a different bridge on it, but it's good. I like it, and I'm happy with it. Second guitar we did, obviously, we have Les Paul Jr. And I've loved Les Paul Jr. Obviously, a lot of my guitar heroes played Les Pauls. Really great. And this just has such a fat neck. These new Epiphone inspired by Gibson models are really spectacular. Again, you can see where the repair is. You can see where the splines have been. The brown paint was a great addition to it because it does mask it ever so slightly. From a distance away, it's not so obvious that it's like broken or whatever. But again, we want to be able to see that the repair has been done with care, that, you know, the guitar is great. This is actually the neck pickup out of that same Firebird. Otherwise, it's all stock. It's got the same knobs as the Firebird does, but everything else is sort of built to the guitar. And the only other real modification I do is I moved a strap pin to the back. I think I do that because the double cuts are like that, and I like the way you hold it. You can balance it up, you can balance it whatever, and you don't have the risk of your strap falling off of this or binding up or whatever. This just, to me, feels like a weird location. I'm just used to flying V's and stuff where it's in the back, and so that's where it is. So both these guitars, a fun challenge. I don't inspire you. Other people inspire me. I just encourage you. I encourage you to repair things, especially if you're pretty good at, you know, different things. This was really not as hard as I thought it would be. It took patience, and it took small amounts of skill, and it took, you know, a few tools, but, you know, I got it done. To these Epiphone guitars, which probably wouldn't have been worth having a professional and hundreds of dollars, I just knew that unless I was able to effectively fix it to make it an effective player, it wasn't worth the trouble of paying someone else to do it. So it was a DIY thing, and it was easier than I thought. And, you know, watch a lot of videos, learn a lot of stuff. It's the best thing YouTube is here for. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to like the video, that's great. There's no real reason to subscribe. I don't do a lot of guitar repairs, but
feel free to leave a comment below on my poor guitar playing skills from the short clips you watched, or on the repairs themselves. Do you think that they're great, or do you think that it's sort of a hack job? I don't know. I think they're great. Have a great day.